It's a football Friday. Even on a bye week, we're going to talk UConn versus Syracuse, the impending ACC and independent battle. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, quick update. October was an incredible month, and November is trending in that same direction. It's all thanks to support with people like you, people in the community who are listening to our show, downloading it, supporting it on YouTube. We're also thrilled to give back to our community, donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to football games, basketball games, both men's and women's. We're also making a monthly donation to Bleeding Blue for Good and hope you'll consider supporting them too. If you're enjoying the show, as we talked about, please take a moment to subscribe, follow wherever you listen. And if you're a subscriber, hit that notification button. That way, when something pops up, you don't ever miss it. As always, thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. This episode is sponsored by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return. New customers place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, coming off a thrilling win in the fourth quarter against UAB, we're bringing in my co-host, or -1, but of the TNT College Football Podcast, Pete Calin, former DB of the UConn Huskies. I don't know, man. What did you think about that come from behind victory versus UAB in Birmingham? And what are your thoughts on the game as a whole?
I thought it was another great signature and character win for the program. I think if any fan were to go back at what their attitudes were at the beginning of the year and would honestly ask what they would want from this team, it would be exactly what they're showing in terms of winning games, developing team chemistry and operational chemistry where they're competent and competitive, and maturing before your eyes and showing signs that, you know, you're growing as a program, you're growing as a winning program. And that win last week basically epitomized all of that. Being down as far as they were, past teams would have just folded up like a wet piece of paper and just would have been thrown in the corner. And this group of players did not do that. Even Coach Moore credited the players themselves with finding a way to dig themselves out of a hole and come out with a win. I think it's a great statement for the players, for the coaches, for the program, the direction that they're going. I'll take it all day long.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been hard on Coach Moore about in-game decisions. And while I believe I've been fair, I also have to give him credit for creating this type of mettle and culture that he's built here. So to your point, I totally agree. That game itself felt like it was slipping out of their hands. And they really never wavered. The defense had some incredible, plays in terms of, it felt like it sometimes, do you ever watch a game and sometimes you feel like you're watching a different game than someone else on social media? Like if you're following it along. And I felt like that was the situation with the UAB game, because I felt like the offense was really lacking. And even though they had a couple good drives, but they weren't putting up points, whereas the defense was kind of giving up some points. But I felt like the defense was always kind of in control of that with deflections, with creating interceptions. They just couldn't finish, and UAB kind of put up more points than they probably should have. But they have some talented players, and so. But I also felt like our offense, until Nick unfortunately got hurt, didn't really show signs of life until Joe Fagnano came in. Did you feel that at all? Like, before we even get into the Nick and Joe stuff, that the defense kind of held their own and kind of was like a bend but don't break, and then obviously they took over in the fourth quarter?
They played okay. I would even think they would admit that they didn't play to their standard in the first half. It seemed like the whole team was just flat.
Yeah.
And not being in a road game situation, it was evident in the way that they presented themselves and the way they played. I think even to the point where Coach Morris said in his after game press conference, he was like, he didn't really know what to say other than say, you guys made your bed. You got to either lie in it or, make a new bed to lie in and find a way to dig out. And again, credit to the maturity of the young men on the team. They dug deep within themselves and found a way to win and came out as a whole different team the second half. For
sure, man. Well, quick first segment. When we return, let's get into Nick versus Joe. We talked a little pre-show about the health concerns for Nick. Maybe it's time to shut it down. I know that's not something he probably wants to hear, but I think that has to have that honest conversation may have to be had going into this bye week and going into next game against Syracuse. But we're going to talk about that coming up after the break. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward when you shop early. That's 50% off omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. Your host here, Mark Zanetto, with Pete Calin of the TNT College Football Podcast. Pete, former DB for our UConn Huskies here as well. Can't forget to say that enough, that you played for the blue and white here. All right, man. So to go back to what I said earlier about the Jim Morris stuff, I really have been critical over them not wanting to pull Nick for performance. Unfortunately, he got hurt again. And so I was in a UConn chat. I'm sure you've seen it, where I was kind of being like, guys, like, enough is enough. Like, I know Nick's a good kid. I know that there's a lot of potential there, but right now we can't use the excuse about reps anymore. And so I was talking about, he's had a ton of reps this year and it's just not clicking, especially in the passing game. And that's the area that needed to be exposed, because they weren't respecting him as a passer. So they're putting a million guys in the box and stopping the run. And so as soon as you had Joey come in there, and I'm a friends guy from back in the day, it was like, how you doing? He started slinging the ball around, and Joe Fagnano is scoring touchdowns like that. What did you see?
Pretty much the same. I saw the difference between a quarterback that has experience in a pro system over one who didn't.
Right. Fair.
The windows are tighter. I don't think it's a matter of Nick not necessarily seeing things, but the other part of it is acting on what you see on time, and trusting the windows that you see, even though they might be small or smaller than you're used to seeing, and letting the ball out and trusting receivers to make plays. And so that was the difference that I saw between Joe Fagnano and Nick Evers. I saw a senior versus a first-year starter. Now, granted, Joe even showed those struggles last year. I think adjusting to the level of competition, he had almost identically the same issues that Nick is having this year, particularly with what I see footwork, just subtle things that allow you to deliver the ball on time, deliver in tight windows that let you be mechanically and operationally sound as a passer. Joe showed the same things last year that he shored up, obviously, this year. And if you look at stats, they're almost identical, but the one difference between the two is touchdown to interception ratio. Nick is 5-5. He's even. He's 0. Whereas Joe is plus 10. He's got 13 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. So there's a level of efficiency that's suggested when he's in there. That's a little bit better from a passing standpoint. And it was effective, last week and in just about every situation he's stepped in this season.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the biggest difference is, and it's so important for a quarterback. And I think this is especially when these, like you said, like a pro level offense, ball placement. Where you place the ball, so your talented receivers who help you look really good on some of these short passes can, get yards after catch, and that's just something that has been lacking with Nick. Like I think the only and how about ball velocity? Like just being able to sling it. Like I think Nick has a decent arm. I think Joey's got a really. I mean, the touchdown he threw. I believe it was to what's the first one? He threw that crossing that
to Shamar.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was going to go through Shamar. Like he threw that like into that dude's chest. So like when he needs the fastball, he can do it. I think the difference in like how I'd love to see him. I know he only has a couple games left if he plays. Some touch, a little bit of touch, he would be a totally different quarterback. But I will tell you, even that first pass to TJ Sheffield where he got horse collar tackled, that could have been a touchdown because he threw it right on him and my guy was ready to go. And that was like a tackle saving. They probably were glad they got the 15 yards because that would have been 6. So like those are the little things that if Nick Evers is going to be the quarterback of the future, if they don't go in the transfer portal again or don't bring up one of the freshmen or recruits, if he has a future at UConn, and I think they believe he does, he's got to get better at that. Like that's I think that's the biggest difference between Nick and Joe is when they complete passes. Like even when Nick completes passes, they're behind. You pointed out like off air one time, giving Nick a little credit. Like sometimes he doesn't want to get his receiver killed, so he'll throw it back shoulder just to kind of settle them down, and that's all fair. But I'm talking about on the whole, the ball placement typically is off with Nick.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, man, you're good.
Can you repeat that? Because you faded out. I couldn't hear what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Like it's essentially just that the ball placement sometimes is back shoulder to protect the receiver, but on the whole, the ball placement has to be better when Nick does kind of become that starting quarterback, maybe for the rest of this year and definitely into next season.
Absolutely. That is the biggest issue, I think, with Nick. I mean, his arm talent is there. You see it. What young quarterbacks have a tendency to do, when they're facing upper level competition, they're focused so hard to drive the ball in spaces that they actually end up anchoring their feet, which causes the other aspects of their mechanics, especially rotation, to be lagging behind and not flowing with the receiver. That's basically what you've been seeing with Nick is that he'll throw the ball, he'll rifle it, but it's behind. And it's because he anchors his feet on the ground. He's not dynamic with his feet, not throwing from the ground. So, he's trying to drive from it, but he's not flowing with the target. And in order to be accurate with the ball, you have to flow with with all your mechanics from the ground up with your target. And that's the subtle but very important thing he's not doing. He's got to learn to do. Joe's figured that out. You can see it in the way he's performing this year as opposed to last year, because again, he had the same issue. He's got a strong arm. He felt like he had to drive it in tight spaces, but it's a matter of, for lack of a better term, flowing with all your mechanics with your target even after you release it. And that's what helps guide the ball to where you want it to go.
Definitely. All right. We talked about this a little bit in the last segment. I teased it. Do you think that Jim Mora has to have a conversation with Nick about shutting it down for the season, especially if he's as banged up as we think he is? Because we really haven't heard anything. You could search it. I've asked people, some sources that I know, and they're keeping a pretty tight lid on this, whether or not he's going to play or not.
Who was that again? Mark, you kind of broke up again. Sorry.
The Nick Evers, whether or not we should have him shut down with Jim Mora.
Depends what kind of injury that was. It looked significant in terms of kind of jamming forces in that hip, and particularly if it compromises his running ability. I would say, if he's our future, treat him like it. He's been beat up quite a bit,
Right.
and if we got a thrower that's performing well, like Joe, um, and you got a bunch of receivers that are hungry, that have shown when given the ball anywhere in their catching radius, they'll catch it. Let's go with that guy and see how we flow. We already know the running backs are going to do their thing. Offensive line seems to have shored up their issues in terms of their technical mechanics with blocking. So I would say, yeah, just leaning with Joe to start the following week.
Okay. Well, when we come back, I couldn't agree with you more. I think they had to protect him. When we come back, even though it's a bye week, our next game is against Syracuse. Syracuse plays Cal this week. So they got a big travel week, and then they got to come back to the East Coast. And we're going to talk about that after the break. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more in the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And we're back on Locked On UConn with your host here, Mark Zanetto. I'm with Pete Calin, former UConn DB. 89-93. I get that right?
Yes, sir. You got it right.
Look at that. All right. 89-93. Those are some good years. Pete also is a part of the TNT College Football Podcast with Bobby Wilson, who is out with an injury. He's on the IL.
Yes, sir.
He'll be back. He'll be back soon.
We miss you, Bobby. Get well, right, man.
So, look, we don't play Syracuse for a couple weeks as a bye week, but we're going to talk about them this week, and then we'll talk about them again as it gets closer, because these numbers may change. This is through they're 6-3, 3-3 in the ACC. Kyle McCord is slinging it for them. He's had a few struggles lately. The Ohio State transfer, the 5-star recruit, obviously has got some big arm talent. He's averaging like 353 yards passing a game. I think maybe more like 320, but the team as a whole is about 353 as a team. How do you think that reliance on passing shapes kind of how we will go about game planning for them? Because they're only averaging about 90 yards rushing.
We're probably going to attack them the way they've been attacked the past few weeks, by Pitt and by Boston College. Try to get a pass rush on the guy, try to play good coverage, and make him see things that he may, think are another thing, and throw picks. I mean, Pitt really did well in disguising their fronts, disguising their coverages, and we all know the end result of that. They returned 3 interceptions for touchdowns, and then Boston College seemed to, in key moments, repeat the same kind of operation going on with their defense, and cause a few turnovers as well, enough to win the game. And they ran down their throat. The surprising thing last week in watching the game against Boston College was how well Boston College was able to run, to the point where I think they only passed the ball, 10 times the whole game.
It's crazy.
So, they look like us, and definitely look like how, we operated against teams recently on our schedule. So, all the factors bode well for us in terms of the time preparation, the style of play that seems to have beaten Syracuse, for us to go in and have a good showing.
Yeah, I'm checking that right now. I'm curious, because I think you're right. If we go to that game, let's see. I hate to keep people waiting, but geez, they barely threw it. I think less than. Well, they had 2 quarterbacks, so 13 times.
Okay.
Grayson James was 5 of 6. Thomas Castellanos was 2 of 7. But they ran it 48 times.
Right. I think their first 40 plays, they only passed the ball 3 times. and they scored
Yeah.
21 points. It's just like, it was insane. So,
but on the flip side, Kyle McCord was 31 of 48 for 392 and 2 touchdowns. So even in a losing effort, he still had some good stats.
Look, the guy can sling it. He was a highly rated recruit for a reason, and he got recruited to Ohio State originally for a reason. He's good,
right?
And he's a Philly kid, South Jersey kid, so he's tough minded. Even with that performance 2 weeks ago, he's the type of player that's going to come back, and I say that because I grew up in that area, and he's going to continue to try to find ways to continue to produce. He's got a great core of receivers. And tight end and Arande Godson, Pena, I think, is another receiver. He's got another guy that was a transfer from Georgia. So he's got weapons that he's been distributing the ball to in order to help that offense. But football's still in its original form. If you don't run the rock, eventually it's going to catch up to you and you're going to have problems. And it's shown the last 2 games for them.
Fair enough. All right. So, again, I know we don't have Bobby here, so hopefully he's back next week and we can get some predictions from everybody. But I'm sure I don't have the video of this, but I wish I did. It's Coach Brown of Syracuse essentially saying that he doesn't use soap after a loss, and it's like a ritual. And they've lost a couple of games in a row. So is he gonna have like flies buzzing around him next week? Because they may lose to Cal too. How do we continue to prevent this man from showering? Give them another L.
Well, if we run the rock the way we like to, we're going to have a good chance. We have to be more consistent in finding ways to run the ball against the good teams, the Dukes, the Wake Forest, and now Syracuse. So that's going to be key. I would like, and I've mentioned this before on a TNT podcast, I think I mentioned it here. Pro offenses thrive when you have a deep threat that can threaten the middle, and we have yet to have done that. We got a guy that has a good chemistry, especially with if Joe starts, that has a good chemistry. All 3 of his touchdowns have come from Joe. I would love to see a guy with speed and size like Shamar Porter just go down the middle of the field and threaten the safeties, get them out of the box, get them out of the, quarters coverages and the immediate support they're going to be providing should Joe be in there, and just test it out. Joe's got a strong enough arm. Shamar's got enough speed to go over the top. I say put it up there, see what he does. Keep them safeties honest so that it opens up the run game should you have a passer like him in there. And just other concepts, with play action passes, besides rollouts that, will beat, the kind of coverage schemes that they're going to face against Syracuse with a passer like Joe if he's in there. And even with Nick, because he's going to be compromised, running the ball. You got to give him some opportunities to open up receivers. I think sending speed down the middle would be a good start. Now, I'll say this, Gordon Samus has done a wonderful job. I think Calin plays, but it's just another suggestion. He seemed to have adapted wonderfully throughout the season. I don't doubt that at all for this game as well.
Well, I think for me, this is like a perception game, because if we beat Syracuse, or at least it's really tight, like at least the Wake Forest game was, people start to pay attention a little more to UConn football nationally. But we've had opportunities against ACC teams already this year. The only big game we laid a complete egg is against Maryland, first game of the year, whatever. Duke and Wake Forest probably should have been wins in my estimation, but I get it. Still kind of a rebuilding process at UConn. If we come out and are flat like we were against Wake and then have to battle back, what will that say about the team as a whole? Because this is 2 weeks out, and they got again. The reason why I was so frustrated about the Wake loss is I felt you were catching a Wake Forest team who, while has ACC talent, is in a down year, and you had an extra week to prepare. You have the same situation with Syracuse. I hate to even say this, but does this feel like a must win for UConn? Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, this is the moment. You know, UMass is, I feel like that's going to be a win. If we don't beat UMass, we got problems. This Syracuse game is a must win to kind of put a rubber stamp on this year in this program.
I think it's a must win in this sense. And, Bobby and I have talked about this before. In order to rise your program, you got to own your own house. It starts in Connecticut and then in New England and expands out in the entire Northeast. Syracuse is one of those teams that is in our way. They're trying to occupy the house, our house that we want. And the bottom line is, no matter what we've done in the past, no matter what kind of games we played against, other Power 4 teams, this is the one we got to come to play. This is the must game because we have to own our house, period. They're in the way. We got to hit them. We got to hit them in the mouth and make whatever plans they have just be futile and say, the landlord's back. And so if we want to progress with our program, they're in the way. We got to, without cursing, F them up because they're in the way, period.
Rent is due is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rent is due every day.
It's one of those games that it's the opponent's there, it's going to battle. There's no running around it. You got to have the attitude where you just lay everything on the field. And, like my mama used to say when I was a smart ass, she used to say, you might beat me, but I'm going to kick your ass if we get into it. And that's the same kind of attitude that we got to have going into that game. They got to know that we're going to kick their ass and we got to make it so that they never want to play us again. That's the kind of war we have to prepare for, period.
I have nothing else to add, man. We're not even going to do predictions because it's too far away. That was great. Listen, appreciate you coming on as always. Bobby, get well. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Pete Calin, I'm Mark Zanetto saying stay locked on, stay connected, roll skis, and go Huskies. We'll be here next Friday talking about the probably same stuff, a little more context.